Welcome VR buffs! Welcome back to this month's VR game news video. As always, before we get to the announcement for December, a quick review roundup of last month. November started off with a room scale bullet hell shooter Desperate Vladivostok. No critics reviews for this one at all, and also only a handful of reviews on Steam, but with a very strong 93% positive. The game is available on Steam and the Quest via the App Lab. Kartoffel is a Lemmings-like VR puzzler that landed on November the 3rd on Steam and the Quest without making a big splash. 6 Degrees of Freedom gave it an appealing 7.5. Quote, "It might not be breaking new ground in its style, but Kartoffel delivers addicting puzzling fun with a creative twist that gives it an identity all its own." The VR version of Among Us hit Steam and the Quest 2 on November 8th. This one got a lot of attention, so I'm taking the opportunity to quote IGN here. Among Us is a strong remake of Inner's Lost social deduction hit. While Shell Games Take could do with extra content, it makes up for this with polished gameplay. IGN was with their opinion on par with more VR focused outlets, giving the game a strong 79 on aggregate review site VR Game Critic. On November the 17th we had 4 noteworthy releases. Going in alphabetical order, we start off with the sword dueling game Broken Edge that landed to a decent 73 on VR Game Critic on Steam and the Quest 2. The VR Grid were less impressed than most outlets. Quote, "The $10 price tag on this does place this in the budget category of VR games, but even at that price I don't really know who the game is for, and while some aspects of it are enjoyable, the entire package just feels like it misses the mark." Next is a stealth-focused first-person shooter Aspire 2 exclusive to the Quest 2 that landed to a decent 70 on VR Game Critics. I'm going to quote the VR Grid again because I write good summaries. Aspire 2 is a very ambitious action stealth title that wants to play in the big leagues but isn't there yet. Regardless of its shortfalls and with your expectations in check, there's still fun to be had here, especially in playing around the sandbox style levels and unlocking mods and weapons to play with, particularly in co-op with a friend. Next on the list is Lon, a story-driven cyberpunk first-person shooter, Steam only, that kind of flew under the radar. No critic reviews for this one. From players it got a mixed reception with 68% positive ratings. Most negative reviews criticized somewhat janky physics but acknowledged the potential of the game. Then we have the early access release of the 5v5 competitive shooter Whale, also Steam only. As this is early access, there are no critics reviews to be expected yet. Steam players gave it a strong 80, while most players enjoyed the experience, some criticized the too simple recoil pattern, lack of an economic system and somewhat inconsistent netcode.
You, of all people, have the audacity to question me? You, who emerged from the putrid waters of the bayou to plunder our righteous gains and cut our throats like a demon in the night.
In the sequel to The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, you once again take up the role of the tourist, traveling the walker-infested sunken city of New Orleans. This time there's an antagonist, the ominous X-Men, who seems to have beef with you personally. There will be new places to explore, new characters to interact with, new weapons and gear to play around with, and a new faction to support or to sabotage. I very much enjoyed the first game. It had some problems with respawn mechanics, pacing and lack of a difficulty curve, but it did a very good job in bringing the dark and gritty universe of The Walking Dead to life. Despite the name, there were no saints in that game, only sinners, as you were constantly put into situations where it would be impossible to do right by everyone. My hope for the sequel is that they keep up writing and world building while polishing up the larger gameplay issues. The game will release on December 1st, only on the Quest 2. A PC, PSVR and PSVR 2 release are confirmed for early next year. I will wait for the PC release as I want to play the best possible version of the game.
Welcome home, tourist.
Remember, recruit, you're part of the O now, under the wings of the mightiest fleet the galaxy has ever seen. But here, within the Twin Planet system, you're on your own.
Hubris is a VR action-adventure game. You take up the role of a recruit in training to become an agent of the Order of Objectivity. As it tends to be the case, your first mission does not go as planned, and you end up being stranded on a wild planet that is in the process of being terraformed. You will need to swim, climb and jump to traverse the environment. There will be combat, a crafting system, vehicles to drive and machines to operate. The game has a narrative that doesn't take itself too serious. In previous coverage about the game, everyone was gushing about the graphics, and I mean, it's not exactly an Elden Ring or God of War, but for a VR game it looks alright, I guess. There are big plans for Hubris. It is supposed to be the start of a new full-blown space saga. After the game's release, there's an animated miniseries in the Hubris universe planned called Terraformer. The studio behind this, Cyborn, is actually a major Belgian animation studio that have co-produced 2 animated feature films, so they definitely have the know-how and resources to pull this off. Will it be good though? We'll have to wait and see, but I appreciate the vision they have. Hubris is scheduled to release on December 7th, at first for PCVR on Steam only. A Quest 2 and a PSVR 2 release are announced for next year. That's all you got.
Alright, sand lizards, this is it. Rook 39 AI Tower, regular shipment inbound. And you are taking it. Should be impossible, right?
Gambit is a co-op first-person shooter with a 20+ hour campaign, dozens of weapons and weapon attachments, skins to collect, leaderboards to climb and minigames to play. Choose one of 4 characters, Frank, Udo, Cody or Kevin, each with his own special weapon, and rampage your way through 9 levels and 3 chapters alone or with up to 3 friends. Real Game's previous title Zero Caliber is still in early access on Steam, with many players feeling like the game was abandoned in favor of the Quest version and or this new game. The studio promises that they are still working on it, but the last update was a year ago now. So far they failed to deliver on that promise. That is something to be aware of before buying into Gambit. The writing in both of the studio's previous titles was over the top redonkulous, which somehow collided with the more serious tone of the game's premises. This more wacky approach seems to be a better fit, and I am kind of curious to see what they made of it. A co-op shooter with a sizable campaign is something I'm completely on board with. Gambit is scheduled to release on December 8th for PCVR on Steam and for the Quest 2, with crossplay between the platforms. And now for something completely different. Tiny Island is a meditative god game. The tiny islands are inhabited by tiny people in dire need of help. But you, as a more or less almighty god, can only interact with the tiny world with chopsticks. Why can you only use chopsticks? I don't know, man. Don't ask too many questions. Just accept it. The game will have a story mode with quest lines to pursue, and once completed a sandbox mode to freely do, well, god stuff. There's a puzzle part to the gameplay, but also strategic elements like resource and building management. Tiny Island is scheduled to release into early access on Steam also on December 8th. A port to other platforms might come later. Finally, we have a little treat for our Quest 2 users. Compound is a fast-paced roguelite retro shooter that released this summer on Steam after a lengthy early access period. With a 97% positive, this is one of the highest rated VR games on the platform. Fight enemies in procedurally generated environments, dodge bullets, die a lot and progress by unlocking new guns between runs. Compound will get a Quest 2 version also on December 8th. The year is coming to an end. Hopefully Saints and Sinners 2 and Hubris will meet the high expectations that I put into them. That would be a nice closure to an overall underwhelming year for VR gaming. I am currently playing through Valheim with VR mod obviously, which is pretty amazing. Later I'm probably going to pick up Hubris, so expect videos on those sometime this month. Apart from that, have a good one.